Before we get started this week, I want to give a shout out to all of these people. These names are people that have recently joined our membership area called Experience Shakespeare. The membership area of our show gives them access to history activity kits, bonus content, and an entire resource library all about William Shakespeare's history. Thank you guys for being here.
Hello there, my name is Cassidy Cash. I'm the host of That Shakespeare Life, the podcast that takes you behind the curtain and into the life of William Shakespeare. I believe that if you want to understand and enjoy Shakespeare's plays, you have to understand the life of the man who wrote them. Shakespeare's plays are literally slices of history, and if you don't understand the history that was going on when he wrote them, the plays can be confusing or not make sense, which is such a shame since they are truly amazing stories and fabulous to enjoy and understand. So each week on the podcast and on Saturdays here on YouTube, we take a piece of Shakespeare's history and share it with you so that you can learn something new about the Bard. This week we're taking a look at Quill ink. That's right, there's a recipe for that and you can make it yourself at home. So to help you experience Shakespeare this week, we are teaching you how to make your very own Quill ink. The two main kinds of ink that you had were either carbon ink or iron gall ink, and they were almost identical except carbon ink was usually made with what's called lamp black. This is another word for soot that you would scrape off of an oil lamp. Now, most Elizabethan and Tudor homes would have been lit with oil lamps, so this was something a lot of people would have had access to, but basically the flame from the oil lamp creates a soot that you scrape off into a bowl of powder, and that's the base for your ink. Now, we're going to use our own form of lamp black here today as the base for our ink, because that's a whole lot easier for us to come by than going through our yard and scouring for oak galls. But the second kind of ink that you could have made was called iron gall ink. It's called iron gall because you use oak balls. These are actually a kind of tumor that grows on the oak tree, but it's just a ball that grows on the tree. You pick them and crush them up, mix them with water and heat it, and it makes this brown liquid. And the brown liquid, you add iron sulfate, which in a lot of Elizabethan records it can be called everything from ferrous sulfate to copperase is the one Mary Greenville uses, and there's also vitriol or green vitriol. In its pure form, it does have a shade of green, and there are variations, like there's another version of this form of iron that would have been tinged kind of blue. So depending on which one you use, it slightly changes the color, which is why in a lot of oil paintings or different records of Tudor and historical artwork, the different kinds of pigments that you would make for paint often have individual recipes. I'll link to several of these in the show notes for today's episode so you can explore further the different kinds of recipes there are for quill ink. Depending on who was making the ink would determine which recipe they wanted to use, because there were slight differences in viscosity, in durability, in corrosiveness. When you're looking into different historical documents, some documents are actually corroding because of the ink. It's called ink corrosion. I'll link to more information on that in context of historical documents in the show notes for today's episode. But basically, each different kind of ink recipe produced a different kind of ink that had various qualities. Some of them are thicker, some of them are thinner, some of them last longer and were more permanent. At one point in Great Britain, they actually passed laws about the official iron gall recipe that was to be used for all ink that was going to go on any kind of legal record in England and Great Britain, because they wanted it to be permanent. And so they had this very specific formalized recipe that they wanted used. Now, iron gall was considered the best kind of ink in Elizabethan England, and just personally, I think it's most likely that Shakespeare would have used an iron gall ink as opposed to carbon ink or some of the others that were available in Elizabethan England. Now, don't quote me on that. I'm not saying that's for sure, but I'm definitely saying that that's a wonderful PhD topic for anyone that happens to be looking for one in Elizabethan England. I just handed you one. You're welcome. Go and research that and please report back to me. But that's my opinion based on the fact that it did have this reputation for being such an amazing ink. And that's the main one that we're going to use here today. Now, you can order these online. You can order whole oak galls. You can also order pre-powdered oak galls if you want to make true iron gall ink. Part of the members kit for this activity will include links to all the different variations of how you can do this, but for today we're going to make our own soot. Now, I don't have an oil lamp, so I'm going to burn some paper. And and we're going to burn the paper in my glass canister because my glass canister is fireproof, and we're going to just contain the fire in there. We'll burn one sheet of paper at a time to then pound it up with the pestle and turn it into a powder. We're going to need about half a cup of powder.
This is where I very quickly realized that this was an outside activity. We rushed it out onto the back porch where we continue to burn little strips of paper. We realized once we got out there that it was going to take a long time to come up with an entire cup of soot from burning the paper. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a fireplace to go and scoop this out of. If you do, go ahead with the proportions that are listed in the recipe that you can download below this video. That includes an entire cup of soot. You'll get more ink that way. But what we end up doing is taking it back inside and using the teaspoon and a half of ash I was able to create in a short period of time from burning these strips of paper. I explained in the video how to do it with a teaspoon and a half of soot.
It's plenty enough to make some good ink with, so we're going to use that. So we start out with the soot, and what you want to mix with the soot is basically a liquid. You want a little bit of water, a little bit of vinegar, and you want some kind of binder. Now, in 16th century England, the ink Shakespeare would have written with would have contained gum arabic, most likely. This is made from the seeds of the acacia tree, and you grind it up and it binds things. This is actually a product you can use in a lot of gluten-free cooking. It's a 1-to-1 substitute for xanthan gum, so it works really well with gluten-free flours, by the way. For today, we're going to use another gluten-free binder that we have on hand because our family is gluten and corn-free here. So we have tapioca starch, and it works a lot the same way. Ideally, I would have used arrowroot starch, but we're under self-isolation and our pantry storage is not what it normally is. So I don't have arrowroot starch today, so what we're going to use is tapioca starch instead. I would recommend you get gum arabic if you can, or use arrowroot starch if you can't, but we're going to try it with tapioca today. When you're making this the authentic historical way,
Okay, wait, let me explain. What I mean by doing this the authentic way is actually two different kinds of Quill ink. The oak gall is used to make iron gall ink. What we're making in today's video is called carbon ink because the carbon comes from the soot.
you would actually have the oak galls would be ground up, and then you soak them for like 8 or 9 days, stirring them 2 or 3 times a day over the course of that time, and that pulls the gallic acid out of the oak galls, and it's the gallic acid reacting with the ferrous sulfate in the iron that creates the black, dark color that makes it the black ink you think of. And that process is being sped up and condensed here by using the carbon ink, and these differences in chemical makeup is what causes the variations in how long it lasts and how easy it is to write with and how easy it is to read when it's on the page. And so that's why different inks had different levels of quality, and why iron gall ink was really considered the best, although it did take substantially longer to make. Now, in my original recipe, we would have used a cup of soot and then half a cup of the distilled water, and then a half a teaspoon of vinegar. Since I don't have all of the soot that I would like, I am going to condense that down and just do half of the amount of soot that I have as how much water I'm going to add. I have about 1.5 teaspoons of soot, so I'm going to use about 3/4 teaspoon of water. So we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, and we're going to stir that up. All nice and pasty. At this point, we've got much more of a paste than anything that resembles an ink. So we're going to add the salt and the binder, which should significantly make this much more like ink. So we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of the salt and 1/4 teaspoon. Now again, this is, you want to use gum arabic if you're doing it actually the pure authentic way. I'm using tapioca starch because it's what I have. And we're really all about the fun here as opposed to anything else, because Shakespeare's life is a ton of fun and you really should have fun learning about it. so we wouldn't want to delay getting to make your own ink just because we don't have gum Arabic. But if you are a member of Experience Shakespeare and would like to make it the actual authentic way, our How to Make Quill Ink Experience kit does include links to where you can buy gum Arabic, oak gall, and ferrous sulfate, which is actually a green powder when you get it, all within the kit. So we do tell you where to get all the purely authentic ingredients inside that kit. Today we're showing you how to make it for fun at home with what hopefully you already have. Stir and stir and stir. And we have something that looks a lot like ink. Let's see if we can draw with it. So now you get to try it out and see if it writes. I'm going to be using just a regular paintbrush. If you have a quill pen on hand, you can try it with your quill. Either way, let's see how it writes. So we're going to get some ink there. And now we're going to write. Oh, how fun is this? Look at that! We've created our own ink. Now you can tell that the ink is a lot thinner than what you might need to write plays or official documents in English Parliament or something, which is probably why iron gall ink is considered better than carbon ink. This week's episode of How to Make Quill Ink is based on a very simple way that you can get some ink just to have fun drawing with a quill or with a small paintbrush on paper and pretending to be just like William Shakespeare. It's designed to inspire you to explore his life and to have some fun today enjoying history. If you'd like to go in more in depth and do the more complicated oak gall recipe that requires about 8 days of soaking and stirring, it's really fun to do and creates a beautiful ink that you can really dip your quill into and draw some beautiful artwork with. That's exactly like what Mary Greenville did at the Folger Shakespeare Library's record. You can find all of the instructions for how to do that as well as 3 other recipes inside the members kit for How to Make Quill Ink. This will come out in the series of kits that are sent to our monthly subscribers. If you'd like access to this kit along with all of the others right up front, you would want to subscribe as an annual subscriber or purchase the How to Make a Quill Ink kit all by itself. And all of that and the details for how to do it is available at castycash.com/experience.